Okay, and we are live. Omer, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Kai. It's really a pleasure to meet you in
Likewise,
this platform once again. Yeah.
likewise. So I was just mentioning to you that our first guest on Fireside was actually Hygraph. Back then, GraphCMS. It was back in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
2022.
I
Um,
remember.
yes, I'm sure you do. Back then, the VP of marketing and a good friend of mine, Ronak, who came on. Now I'm very pleased that you've joined me, giving us a bit of an
Yeah,
update with Hygraph and what's been happening, that transition that happened, of course, from GraphCMS to Hygraph, the whole content federation thing. When people log into highgraph.com right now, you're going to see that it's a content federation platform. So I think this is a good place
yeah,
for us to refresh, good place for us to start, set the scene today. What is Hygraph today? What was GraphCMS? What is Hygraph today? And what is content federation?
yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. I think we can begin from the rebrand and what happened since then. We've rebranded, as you might know, in July from GraphCMS to Hygraph. That's, I think, the transition that many startups are having at one point, right? The move towards the platform from the feature set that you are enabling at first. In the beginning, we were very pragmatic when Daniel and Michael, our founders, have founded the company in 2017. We were the first. We've had the first native GraphQL API, and then it was an amalgamation of the GraphQL and the CMS. It's a little bit like I would say calling your band Metallica. It's what we were. We were GraphQL based CMS, and then we got our initial adoption curve from the adoption of the GraphQL that have had amazing adoption in the community, of course. But then, of course, we had gone through a transition, and we talked about this transition earlier on, also in this channel. But very quickly, when we began in 2017, it was the first in the market, our GraphQL API, and then at that point, it represented the next evolution in the content delivery space. The GraphQL enabled a lot of things. The development got much faster. The GraphQL requires a lot of developers to quickly make adjustment to the data that they need for the respective view, and whether it's pricing, VAT, inventory data, or something else. And it also improved efficiency for developing applications, and then they had more flexibility. But since then, of course, some of our competitors also had GraphQL APIs, only few native, and in other cases, an afterthought maybe. But then we are not anymore the only content platform providing the GraphQL API. But then with the federation, we believe that we were again once more going towards the next evolution again in the content platforms. The present is, as you know, the front-end agnostic, right? Everybody knows what that means, how we are enabling different types of interfaces, whether it's mobile, web, or any other platform, or VR, however you can think of. But then we really thought before July, when we rebranded, what would be the next evolution in the headless CMS category? What would if the first one was the web CMSs, right, coupled CMSs, and the second generation were the front-end agnostic CMSs, whether it's hybrid or native headless CMS, and then we began thinking about the third generation. I think that what led to the considerations on this third generation of headless CMS category was already there. The problems were already there. What we know is that there were the content hub idea, right? Many other companies have adopted under different names. And then basically this consists of pushing all your data to your platform, content platform, and then your headless platform acted as the repository. But in that case, of course, you have to always maintain the data syncing in between your repository and other systems, whether these systems, again, be like an e-commerce system, a DEM, or a PIM, or any other system that you might have, whether greenfield or brownfield. They were running into the scaling problems. You have to have this content freshness, fresh data, and then the synchronization becomes a bottleneck for these companies. And then we began to think about the federation. And again, federation as a notion is not new. Also, Apple is talking a lot about federation. But then we thought about, okay, there are all these tools out there, and then you can build your own middleware maybe. But then how can we make this more usable for the companies out there and the developers, of course? And we began to think about becoming the federated content platform, in the sense that we believe we've betted on the third generation of CMS to become backend agnostic. So we got this rebrand in July, and then since then we've got pretty good adoption, and then we are still working on having the recognition also in the domain, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think for anybody like struggling to grasp this, I think backend agnostic or backend agnosticism is like the gateway to understanding this, right? So you mentioned that there's front end agnosticism. With headless CMS, we know what that means, right? The content can go anywhere, right? It doesn't care about where you put that content. What Hygraph has become is backend agnostic. Again, not necessarily a new concept, but a concept that you're focusing on, a concept that you're putting at the forefront and at the focal point of the platform, a problem that does exist. And I think you've made a good bet, because as Mac architecture, as a composable sort of paradigm shift continues, we are seeing, and this is going to sort of segue us into our next point here. Lots of enterprise brands who have been using legacy monolithic systems, and not just one, multiple systems all at once to achieve their goals. They're now seeing Mac, they're now seeing composable as the way forward. And they're saying, okay, great, we're convinced, but we've got like some content over here in this legacy system, some content over there, integrating it and migrating it, and they're not even sure what that looks like, right? So that problem definitely exists, and it's leading to a lot of enterprises who they're sold on Mac, they're sold on composable, they're sold on headless, but that journey of just getting all that data and content in where it needs to be, because it's sort of locked into so many different silos, it's just like it seems like a huge mountain to climb. And so Hygraph presenting themselves as, the system, the first sort of system to make this a focal issue and say, hey, we're going to solve this, not just solve it from a technical perspective, but streamline it and make it easier. As you said, instead of it being a bottleneck, you want to make that something that's like easy and just like seamless. So yeah, I think as we're on the cusp of this whole composable paradigm shift, and this is a very good position for Hygraph to be in, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the tools are out there, right? You can always create your own middleware. And then we believe that we are telling some of our prospects also that sometimes if you definitely have the resources maybe, and then your project doesn't require a lot of editorial experience in addition to the representation of the data, you can, of course, always build your own middleware. But then we also believe that these custom middleware solutions are always expensive to build to begin with, and then you do not have always the in-house knowledge to create this in-house custom middleware, right? And then even if you create that, then you have to maintain it, and then you have to host it. You have to have ongoing support for that for your own user in-house or outside. So we are making it easier. So whether it's hosting, the scalability, the technical complexity of a custom middleware, we know that it can be overwhelming, and then it can take away more from the critical tasks. Like something that we want to convey is, of course, always that the high investments are usually on the integration and the middleware creation side of the things, right? But then what drives the customer value is more on the front end when it comes to creating the ability to create a digital experience. And we are kind of trying to allow you to the most of your investment on what drives these experiences rather than creating this custom middleware in-house. And so it's like a two-sided value proposition, what I would like to call. It's better than Content Hub idea, because of content freshness. The content is always up to date. It's not like having the full copy of the data, but we are federating this content in real time almost. And also on the other end of the value proposition, it's better than the custom middleware solutions in some cases when you have also this need to have editorial content, right?
Yeah. So on this subject of like the brownfield project, is Hygraph seeing more and more companies coming and saying, hey, look, we've been using legacy systems for a while. What's the way out of this? And if so, what's like the average? How many platforms are using at once? Is it usually they're just stuck in one sort of legacy monolith? What does that look like? And what's your sort of your proposition to them? Is it like, hey, we'll handle all of the sort of federation, you handle the other stuff? Does it have to be a very sort of, they have to be highly involved? What does that look like?
I think it varies, right? The important thing here is the idea that we are providing them the tools to future-proof their investment, the further investment. And then in many brownfield projects, of course, there are huge investments that have been done during the last 20 years, maybe. And it's not always possible to have a big bang modernization. You cannot expect all these different systems that have been connected to each other with glue code, with homegrown middleware to each other to be migrated at once. And I think that that's the beauty of federation in the sense that we are integrating with these also legacy systems and then providing them a way for our customers to have this maybe a small new investment that they're thinking for one of their brands that needs data from an ERP, that needs data from a PIM. And then we are saying, hey, look, whatever system that you have, let's not take the big bang migration idea, but let's do a modular modernization. Let's ingest some of the, it's not even ingestion, let's federate, some of your data, whatever we want to showcase in this new project. And then let's go from there. And then if things go forward well, it will also allow you to migrate the rest of your data, right, at your own pace. So it's this idea, it's all about this modular modernization rather than big bang migration, I would say.
Yeah, and that is like the crux of composability, right? Like when you read about the composable architecture, the sort of the flashy the sales pitch is, hey, you can sort of build anything you want. You can have 10 different MarTech apps all working together, and it's all composed, it's all API first, and that's true. But this is like the real side of composability, which is, hey, if you've been using a legacy monolith for the last 15 years, there is a composable route to composability, right? There's that back end composability that facilitates that gradual migration, right? It's not like an all-in-one, we're going to do it overnight or we're going to do it in 3 months. It's a composable gradual route to composability, and that's part of that composable discussion. That's part of the benefit of composability of Mac. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion.
And I think it really lowers the time to market there, right? Like these big migration projects are always taking a lot of time, a lot of resources without allowing the business users, whether it's the product leadership or the tech leadership, not having the ability to showcase the ROI that they're bringing. But then with federation, I believe also that the time to market is really being lowered in that sense. Correct.
That's a good point. So looking over our notes, we want to discuss composability, the composability best of breed versus vendor fatigue. So kind of similar to what we were just discussing, but slightly different. And I know you want to talk about like the overlaps with different vendors in the market and where exactly Hygraph sees itself. What's your take? What's your take on the whole best of breed versus vendor fatigue issue?
I mean, first of all, I'm so happy to be part of this movement, let's say, because whenever we talk with analysts, whenever we are on LinkedIn reading through the different comments, there's a lot of discussion about what is DXP, what does it mean at the moment, what is DXC, what is DXO, even digital experience orchestration,
Yeah.
and there's never-ending discussion. And I believe that it's important to discuss what are all these acronyms mean, but at the end of the day, it's important to understand that there will be overlaps between what we provide. When you think about federation at the end, it's orchestration, it's API orchestration. But then when you are looking at the some of the competitors, I know Sana from Conchia, for example, is very keen on talking about what is the XO, and I really am happy that she's bringing a lot of her thoughts out there. But then they're also handling some of the personalization part or some of the A/B testing part. And I think that every vendor, even though we are Mach members, will bring their own take on certain parts of the stack. And it's only normal. The only important thing, in my opinion, is to stay true to Mach principles there, make sure that whatever we do, they'll play well together and then bring value to the customer. And then I'm not so worried about the abbreviations. I'm just more worried about maybe bringing the explanation for the user, for the prospect, to understand what we can do alone and what we can do with our partners, right? And this brings maybe to the topic, to what you mentioned about vendor fatigue and the overlap. Like all these overlaps between the vendors and then the capabilities that they provide is likely to cause some vendor fatigue, both from operational side, I would say, in the sense that you have to, as you know, deal with many different account execs. You have to deal with a lot of different contracts, but also from tech stack perspective, it makes the evaluation process quite hard. And I think we'll have to handle this together with other vendors, with more close-knit partnerships. And then we are now beginning to going to next stage for Hygraph, investing more in partner marketing, but also not only co-marketing, but co-selling. Because more and more we are feeling that our prospects are coming to us with a set of different capabilities they need. And then we are really looking forward to enable those through co-selling, not only even co-marketing, really going in front of the prospect with these
interesting
ready solutions.
Yeah, it's interesting because there has to be a careful line drawn, because with composability, with best of breed, one of the main selling points is, okay, I can choose my headless CMS, and I can go and choose my headless commerce system, my PIM, my DAM, my personalization engine, my search engine, and I can choose it myself, and I can make sure that each platform meets my requirements and it meets my budget, so on and so forth. The more we get into like co-selling and sort of like combining these things on a business perspective, like, okay, we're headless CMS and we'll do like co-selling with a headless commerce platform and a DAM, for example, we have to be careful not to overstep the mark and like tie people in and like and vendor lock them in, you know. So there's a fine line there, and so I do think that role would probably be played by a third party in the mix. That's like managing a Mac architecture. Again, managing those contracts, making sure, hey, you know, your contract is ending over here, that kind of stuff. That's probably the best way to do it and not impede that best of breed benefit, which is, hey, I've got different interactions with all of you. I can drop you at a drop of a hat. I can drop you. I can replace you with another search engine. If we sort of combine it, we risk again making it look a monolith, right? Like they're separate, but behind the scenes, the contract includes everybody, and it can get tricky. So it's a problem. It's a problem. I'm not sure what the solution is, but yeah, third party, it springs to mind. But for sure, at the same time, definitely closer partnerships, closer collaboration with different vendors needs to happen, and across different sort of verticals as well, right? So we're mentioning the obvious ones, the dams and the headless commerce systems, but there's going to be so many more enterprises leaving their legacy, their monolith, and they've built over the last 10, 15 years, like you said, like tons of glue code and middleware and custom stuff, and they're going to need a lot of different SaaS tools to make their experience work and to grow their experience. So we're gonna,
Yeah.
we're gonna see headless CMS vendors, partnering and integrating with, different verticals that we've never seen before. I think over the next year or two, just totally different
Absolutely.
verticals that you'd never even think of. We mentioned VR and AR, but I'm thinking like, even just stuff you never even thought about, like farming tech, for example, stuff like that. Where it's just like no one's got
Mhm.
integration, no headless CMS integration got integration with the leading farming management system, if that even exists. You know what I'm saying? So
Exactly. And
I've
then
got a
we
feeling
are
that's going to happen.
we are talking about composability when it comes to a very specific subset of
Exactly.
features and capabilities. But then I guess the composability goes beyond. There's composable
sure.
logistics that we are talking about, where there's composable HR, right? And
Yep.
it's the technology is only the enabler, and then the mock principles are in the beginning looks like they're technical, but we believe that it goes beyond the technicality. Technology enables the capabilities, and capabilities then enable the engagement with the end user, and
Yes.
that's what we care most about, because you can also gain capabilities, but unless they are translated into engagement at the end user side, they don't mean much, right?
Exactly. And this just like reinforces my thoughts on how early we are in this whole Mac thing. Like, there's so many verticals and industries out there that haven't been touched by this whole trend yet,
Yeah.
right? When you think about it, and it's just like, as you said, it's a very small sort of, not, I wouldn't say small, but in that sense, but it's in the sense of like, if you look at most headless CMS's um, customers across the landscape, look at their case studies,
Mhm.
you can kind of put them in like 5 to 6 buckets, right? Which is not many buckets, right? 5 to 6 industries, if you will. And there's not too many outliers. And as we went to get farming and logistics and industrial manufacturing,
Sure, yeah.
there's so much there that hasn't been touched, right? And when it does, we're going to again see integrations and marketplaces and plugins and whatever else, and co-selling and collaboration in ways that we've never seen before. And it's going to be an interesting ride, because it's there's a lot of issues to figure out, as you mentioned. There's a lot of problems need to be solved. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, is again about increasing the enterprise's ability to engage with their users. And you're right, it doesn't end when it comes to the capabilities. It's okay to enable one of your partners to have a localization add-on maybe, and then that's why we've invested in our app framework. It's a novel thing. We did the launch last week, and we had first, for example, in the beginning, localize as a localization partner, but now there's also crowding, right? So you were again absolutely right when you said that we shouldn't create the lock-in. So when you have also the technology becoming the enabler there, right? If we didn't have that framework, then maybe it would be hard for another player to come and integrate with us. But we do our utmost to enable all players out there. If they want to build something with Hygraph, we are always open for that. And at the end, it's not only about the capability, but then what do you do with localization? Well, it helps you to make your global brand feel like a local one, right? When I'm selling Hygraph with localize or crowd-in, I'm not only selling a capability, I'm selling them the ability to engage with their customers locally, but in the global scale. That's what's important, I think.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point. Okay, we're creeping towards the 25-minute mark, which is where I like to
Yeah,
keep these. We have more to discuss, and I could talk with you for far longer. So I'd like to
yeah,
formally invite you back on. Maybe in a few months' time, I'll get you back and we'll discuss some other issues, and maybe we'll talk about some Hygraph customers, which I think we want to get into
yeah,
at some point.
definitely.
But yeah, this has been super interesting. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kaya, and I hope we can meet again soon.
For sure.
Ciao.